Dear viewer, please join me in your fantasy on the travel to a synagogue of a small community in central Germany, but also back in time for about 190 years to Gröbzig in Anhalt around 1835. The synagogue is, next to the church, the highest building of the small town. She towers over every other house, and another proof of its height, no boy can throw the ball above its roof. So welcome to Gröbzig in Germany. As you travel digitally, let me remind you, we are in the state of Saxony-Anhalt. We're about 25 kilometers, so 10, 15 miles away from Halle. In a living and breathing city, as you can see, and about 90 minutes south of Berlin. What you see here is probably the most important synagogue ensemble we have left in Germany. We have not only this beautiful synagogue itself, but also the community building you just saw and little storage room for the hearse. We have the school and we have the Jewish cemetery, which is about 2 kilometers, 3/4 of a mile away. What you heard at the beginning is also the recollection of the most famous Jewish Gröbziger, Jewish person from Gröbzig, Chaim Steinthal, and his recollections of his childhood, synagogue, and school. So why do we have a Jewish community here in Gröbzig, in small town? Well, this is rooted in the fact that Gröbzig is on the border between the small state of Anhalt and the big states of Prussia and Saxony. Whereas Anhalt had a very liberal policy towards Jews, so residence here was easy, economic prospects awaited in Saxony and Prussia. So this was the perfect location for a Jewish community. It grew over the years. In the 18th century, 15% of all people in Gröbzig were Jewish, and they lived harmoniously together. Proof of that is when in 1934, we're talking about the Nazi period, and an already dwindled Jewish community. The question arose what to do with this beautiful, magnificent building. And it was agreed to give it to the local historical society, who moved in and did their best to save the Jewish history of Gröbzig. That's why we have this beautiful, unique, and entire ensemble. So please join me as we go into the synagogue and follow me without being hit by a car. The synagogue of Gröbzig does not bear a symbol on the outside. On top of the roof, however, there's a weather vane which presents the year of its erection. The walls are very thick, as if made for eternity. You open the door after knocking with a key on it for 3 times in order to announce to the sanctuary your arrival. You enter by taking a step downstairs. We are now here in the courtyard of the synagogue in Gröbzig. And of course, your tour guide has a name. My name is Anton Hieke, and I work with the Museum Synagogue Gröbzig. Now we see the beautiful and magnificent synagogue, and the recollections you heard of Chaim Steinthal are not correct anymore, as the synagogue had been refurbished in 1850. As you can see right now, we are in the process of renovating it again. Back then, before refurbishment, there were 3 half circles, and one of them, with an open entry, by the way, one of them was also the entrance to the women's gallery. In Orthodox Judaism, traditional Judaism, women and men are seated separately. And as you can see, with the refurbishment of the synagogue, reform had entered Gröbzig as well. Let us now go inside this entrance hall, which Holger Brülz called a very nice gateway from the outside world into the world of the divine. I have the original key of the synagogue. Let us knock. As you can see the door, it's not original, so let's take this key. and follow me inside the synagogue. We're now on the passageway to the actual synagogue, and if you recall, this side was blocked with a door or closed with a door with a refurbishment in the 19th century. Behind me, you see the entrance and the staircase, to the women's gallery, which we will enter momentarily. But here is the actual entrance to the synagogue with the stained glass windows. Very beautiful, if you ask me. As you know, any active synagogue requires any man of whatever age to cover the head. As this is a museum, not an active synagogue, it's optional, and personally I decide against it right now. You may recall that anything could be a synagogue if it's assigned to be one, like the courtyard in front of the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, or the prayer rooms of small-town communities, as it still exists in Dessau and Magdeburg in the state of Saxony-Anhalt here in Germany. Please now follow me into the synagogue and enjoy the view when you enter. The ceiling is high and made of wood and painted with several very dark clouds promising a heavy thunderstorm. Between them and the blue sky there are stars. From the ceiling there are 8 chandeliers, and in the center, above the Alba More, there is a chandelier made of crystal. And here again the descriptions of Chaim Steinthal for around 1835 are not exactly current, as the thunderstorm on the ceiling is cleared and we now have a night sky, which likely is also part of the liberalization and reform process that also took part in Gröbzig. If you wonder why the ceiling looks so different than the roof from the outside, it is simply the attic of this very nice ceiling, which was also used to hide away Judaica during the Nazi period. The synagogue in Gröbzig has 2 peculiarities, one minor one and a bigger one. This is the minor one, the clock, which you also find in the synagogue of Halberstadt, for instance, also in the state of Saxony-Anhalt. It was likely introduced with the renovation in the 1850s, 60s, and is part of the reform process, when it became more important to actually watch your time during prayer and service. The other bigger peculiarities are actually here, the tzedakah, donation boxes for charity. We have, what's peculiar about it is, first, it's in the column, but also we have 5 of them on both sides. And they served particular purposes. This one on top, for instance, was for the Torah Talmud Society. That was a society dedicated to the school. Every money that went in there was used for the school. And here in Gröbzig, pending the money, of course, we are in the process of restoring the original face of the columns with the inscriptions. In all synagogues worldwide, you see the most common, most important symbols for Judaism and Jewish tradition. The Magen David, the Star of David, and the menorah. In both, the number 7 is extremely important. The creation of heaven and earth, and the Shabbat, the one day of rest. By the way, the menorah already stood in front of the temple in Jerusalem. Here in Gröbzig, we actually had the Chanukia, with 9 lights commemorating the wonder of the little lamp that burned for 8 days on Hanukkah. This is original, built in Gröbzig in 1886, and it is still part of the synagogue. It was one of the items hidden away to save it from the Nazis. Now follow me to the center of every synagogue worldwide, the Aron HaKodesh, the Torah Ark. The Torah Ark here in Gröbzig is adorned by beautiful tablets of the 10 Commandments, which were given to Moses by God on the Sinai. Well, when I say 10, actually in Judaism, we are talking about more than 600, but the 10 are the essence. And of those 10, the first is most important, I am your God, and the other, love thy neighbor like yourself. The Aron HaKodesh is always beautified by a curtain in this case, and it holds the most sacred item in every synagogue, and for Judaism, I have to add the Torah scroll. Here in Gröbzig, it is beautified by a red velvet cover. And the red velvet cover here is also mentioned in a newspaper article from October the 7th, 1898, when the cantor T, ripped into pieces property of the synagogue because he was not tenured for life. And among them was the cover of the Torah Ark. He was sentenced to prison for 2 months and 3 days to consider what he had done, as it says in the Ark. Now, what is the Torah scroll? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Ve'ha'aretz hayta tohu v'bohu. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and the earth was desolate and empty. This is how the Torah scroll begins, and it tells the story of the world, of the creation, and of the Jewish people. The Torah scroll you see here, and it is always a scroll, it's never a book for services. The Torah scroll you see here was found in the synagogue in 1945, together with the other one we have. It is always handwritten on parchment, and this is about 50 meters, 50 meters, I'm sorry, I cannot calculate yards. I'm sorry, I'm joking. It is on parchment, and it is more sacred. It has to be kosher, which means it has to be pure according to the law. This one is not. Remember, we are in the sea. And just before I send you on your way back to Great Britain, back to Australia, back to America, I also want to, in India, of course, I want to show you the most beautiful view on the interior of the synagogue at the old women's gallery. Please join me as we move up. Thank you very much for joining me on the women's gallery here in our synagogue in Gröbzig. With the last view of this beautiful building, we will send you back home to your homes behind the screens. As you look around, imagine 1896, the 100th anniversary of the synagogue, when it was filled with people from near and far who had been born in Gröbzig, born and raised, of course. As you look around and you see the Chanukia, remember that it is mentioned specifically in the article I'm about to read in the native German. Der 30. November, der erste Abend des Chanukka-Festes, hat in diesem Jahre für unsere kleine Gemeinde eine besonders festliche Bedeutung. Mit der Feier des Makkabäerfestes verband sie das 100-jährige Bestehen des Gotteshauses, das durch fürstliche Huld und opferwillige Leute begründet noch heute eine Zierde des Städtchens bildet. Nach beendeten Mincha-Gebet und Anzünden der Chanukka-Lichter hielt Herr Landesrabbiner Dr. Freudenthal aus Dessau die Festpredigt, ein oratorisches Meisterstück. Gegen 7 Uhr begann der fröhliche Teil des Festes, der in sehr harmonischer Weise verlief, unterhalten durch schöne Tischreden, durch Darlegungen von Erinnerungen aus alter Zeit, Aufführungen eines von Leo Löwenthal verfassten Festspiels. Und alle bald blieben alt und jung bis zur frühen Morgenstunde zusammen. Safe Travels.